Hello, everybody, and welcome to Realcomm Live. It is so good to be with you all, and I got to tell you, we have got an exciting show today. As we hope and pray that we are moving towards the end of COVID, which is still a big if, but indications seem that we might actually be heading in the right direction. We are going to get back to some of the conversations we had regarding what our buildings need to look like to be competitive in the 21st century. And on top of that, what does a building look like post-COVID when everybody's been used to working from their home? Well, it's pretty safe to say that those buildings are going to have to be different. They're going to have to offer new amenities, more innovative ways of working and playing. And our guest today, we are going to have an incredible conversation about wireless as it relates to the building, to the campus. And we've been having this conversation for over 15, almost 20 years. It started with the concept just of in-building wireless. It went to DAS, distributed antenna systems. Of course, we're all familiar with Wi-Fi, 802.11. But there's a new sheriff in town, so to speak. 5G and all the ancillary technologies that come along with that are going to offer some exciting opportunities. We got 5G consumer, we've got CBRS, we've got private LTE networks, and all of this means a communications infrastructure that will really prepare your building to deal with what the tenants' needs are going to be in the future. So with that, I would like to bring on our two great guests today. We've got Dave Wright, president of the OnGo Alliance, formerly the CBRS Alliance, and Verdun Chowdhury, VP of Smart Cities from JBG Smith. Guys, how are you today?
Doing great. Thanks, Jim.
Doing well. Thank you, Jim.
You know, I mean, when I look at the two of you, I see massive telecommunications experience, Dave, probably 25, 30 years, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And I see Verdun, the real estate guy with a vision and a company willing to support that vision. This conversation really is the future. And I would consider you guys, first in, if you will, from the standpoint of taking the chances and the risk. And that's what's going to be fun about this conversation, is that we're going to be able to get relatively deep on the technology side, not too deep, but certainly at a concept level. And then we're going to say, okay, how does this apply to these buildings? And not just a building, but a massive project that's going to be taking place in the Washington, D.C. area. So, Dave, let's start with you. Give our audience just a little overview of what the heck, we all, have seen the commercials for 5G on the consumer side, but tell us a little bit about what this means with CBRS and other technologies on the business side, if you will.
Sure. Yeah, and thank you again for having me. I've been the president of the OnGo Alliance, or what's now the OnGo Alliance, used to be the CBRS Alliance. I've been the president for just over 3 years now. I was the secretary. The organization is about 4.5 years old. We've got almost 200 members, and it's a bit of a who's who in the telecom and the technology space. So everybody from the mobile network operators, the tier ones, the cable operators, cellular infrastructure vendors, enterprise wireless system vendors, which your audience may be a little bit more familiar with, although I'm sure they work with the mobile operators also. Tower companies and a whole slew of other folks that have come together to really, initially the initial focus was on operationalizing and commercializing the CBRS band in the U.S. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that is now. We got that initial commercial authorization just over a year ago. And so for the last year, we've been, getting this thing going and seeing the market grow. So I think, what, as you said, Jim, in the lead-in, right, your audience is well familiar with, DAS systems, with the licensed cellular opportunities they may have had for some of their properties. And they also understand the economics of where DAS makes sense. And then Wi-Fi at the other, at the other end of the options, if you will. The company that I work for makes Wi-Fi solutions. We certainly don't think Wi-Fi is going anywhere, but Wi-Fi is not the right solution to every problem that you have, and it's not necessarily the best way to meet some of the needs for high security, high reliability type applications. If you need mobility, you need some extended range, potentially battery life. Those are all areas where Wi-Fi is not always the best solution or not really optimized. So, what CBRS is bringing is a new opportunity, right? This is an opportunity for a property manager to deploy their own LTE and or 5G solution in their building. and to use that for internal communications needs, and we would call that private networking, right? Private LTE, private 5G. And then also potentially to open up that same footprint, that same in-building cellular footprint to the subscribers of the mobile network operators. So this becomes an attractive alternative to DAS for buildings where the ROIs just don't make sense for a DAS system, smaller properties. And because you can deploy this on essentially common or neutral spectrum, which is really the key aspect of CBRS, it becomes an easy way for all of the MNOs to meet without having to deploy their own license bands within your buildings or deploy their own small cells within your buildings. So a single neutral infrastructure for those services. So 150 megahertz of spectrum, 3550 to 3700. The reason that that's important is those are globally frequencies that have been used by LTE for about 10 years now, and they're some of the prime frequency ranges for 5G services. So that means there's a vibrant ecosystem of equipment available, certainly for LTE, and it's growing by the day for 5G services. Yeah, maybe that's
from kind of a high level. I mean, for those of us who've been pushing or around the in-building wireless conversation for 15 plus years. We've gone through the various phases. Obviously, 802.11 made its way in pretty easily, but
sure.
But the DAS conversation has been a difficult one, right? I mean, from the standpoint of who pays and what's the ROI, as you mentioned earlier. This one feels different. It feels like the telecommunications industry is definitely interested in getting inside buildings now. Is that a fair statement?
Certainly, my perspective. I mean, I'm curious what Wright has to say on that, but I think it's well accepted that 85% plus of wireless data usage, cellular devices, is occurring in building. So mobile operators are well aware of that. They don't want to lose that subscriber relationship as soon as the subscriber walks into a building. At the same time, you got LEED certification and other issues that are making a lot of these commercial properties, especially the office high rises, essentially Faraday cages. You're not getting much of a signal from the outdoor macro network inside those buildings. So we need solutions, and OnGo allows a property manager to deploy a in-building cellular solution at price points that are more similar to Wi-Fi. I'm not saying they're as inexpensive as Wi-Fi, but they're more at the Wi-Fi price point than at the DAS or traditional license points.
Well, we certainly appreciate what the CBRS Alliance, now OnGo, has done. We've been working with you guys for a number of years now to kind of be the bridge between the technology conversation and the owner operator, which is our world. And I really appreciate you being here today. Sure. So for Don, your project, the way you're leaning into this new technology is extraordinary on every level. Why don't you just start with a little bit of your history, and then the company, and then the vision for this project as it relates to this wireless conversation?
Sure thing, Jim. And thanks again for having me. And it's a pleasure to be with you and Dave on the call today. So by way of introduction, Vardhan Chaudhry here. I'm a vice president in our investments group at JBG Smith, which is a large real estate investment trust that's localized in the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia region. And we are the master developers. We're building National Landing, which is the community that you may have heard of as the home of Amazon's HQ2 and Virginia Tech's billion-dollar innovation campus, directly adjacent to Reagan National Airport and south of the Pentagon. And it's a really exciting project. If you look on the map that looks to be up on the screen here, you kind of get a sense of its size and its scale. And what's unique about this particular district is just exactly that, the size and scale, and frankly, the amount of control and density of ownership that we as JBG Smith have across this district from north to south. And what we're focused on is not only just our real estate holdings and all the master planning and neighborhood development work that we're doing, which is fantastic. And frankly, JBG has built a legacy of building extremely fantastic places and focused really heavily on this concept of placemaking, curating environments, creating neighborhoods that people love, people who live, work, play, and learn can really identify with. On the back of the physical infrastructure and the physical neighborhood we're building, we started thinking and focusing on this concept of digital placemaking. And how we think about that in the context of our broader Smart City initiative is, Jim and Dave, you sort of mentioned this, amenities and amenitization of the environment. So we're thinking about digital placemaking as exactly that. It's the future and the evolution of physical placemaking, but moving on to sort of in a high-tech digital economy, having the amenities in place for people who live, work, play, and in corporations, large, medium, and all the way to small startups that have the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure at their fingertips to usher in the next wave of growth in our economy. Right. And for us, CBRS, we're really excited, frankly, to be able to leverage all the hard work that David and the CBRS Alliance team have done over years, and sort of open up this opportunity for new entrants or sort of participants like us who would never have otherwise been in the business of owning spectrum to do just that.
Right, and I want to talk about that for a second. I mean, when that auction took place, was there any other real estate owner operators at the table other than you?
Dave, we were tracking. You might have a better view. I know that we were one of, if not the only one, then one of few that we were tracking.
That's what I'm assuming.
Right. I think that fit particularly into the sort of the commercial property management space. I mean, there were other, I would say it, investment, kind of some traditional players in the spectrum investment in pooling space. But yeah, it's a JPG.
They were buying the tickets to scalp later. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, there might have been some of that going on.
But let's not lose sight of the point that as a real estate owner operator, you were one of the only ones, right? Because you understand that the future is going to be based on strong, robust telecommunications. First in, you got Amazon, you got Virginia Tech, you're in the DC area, you got Amazon. I mean, think about these anchors who are all technically savvy. You've now got an infrastructure. Are you going to be creating amenities and live use or live work play use cases that your competitors will not be able to do, given that you're leaning into this?
It's a great question, Jim. And when we entered the CBRS auction, and just to maybe give a maybe start at the end and go a little bit back, we are now the majority PAL spectrum holder in Arlington. We own 4 bands of CBRS spectrum up in Arlington County, and we are the plurality holder of spectrum in Alexandria with 3 bands. And we're very excited about that. And so I'll tell you a little bit about how we approached our investment in this. And it's not so much to be in the business of service provision. We knew early on that we would partner. We didn't necessarily know who we would partner with to make use of this spectrum and actually deliver service. But we knew that we were interested in acquiring the spectrum to have it be available in national landing for our tenants for uses, for innovative uses, as an amenity. But we sort of think of it going back to the analogy of the physical placemaking. We want to curate the environment, so we'll invite, and we want to help a Michelin star restaurant set up their restaurant, a fast casual restaurant set up their restaurant. We'll own the real estate in the shell, but we're not actually setting the menu or cooking the food, and that's exactly how we view CBRS. It's a fantastic solution that we think, or technology that we think, will allow companies to have access to highly privatized, secure networks in the LTE space, and soon 5G as well. And we're very bullish on the concept that these sorts of networks will be critical to innovation inside the building environments, but even outside of the building environments as well. In the public realm and retail environments and things of that nature.
But if you think about it from a strategic standpoint, going back to the real estate story, I mean, is there going to be any tech company that's not going to want to lease space in this project? I mean,
I hope the answers go to that, Jim.
I think that was a loaded question, but the point is, I mean, you're providing the infrastructure, the foundation to play with the future, right? And where they don't have to figure this stuff out on their own. You're saying, we got the water, we got the elevators, we got the lights, some of the old things. Now you've got a telecommunications infrastructure that is truly future-proof, right? Making it easy for them.
It's interesting you use water, and Dave, I'm really curious about your thoughts, because I know we've chatted about this with CBRS Alliance and your colleagues. Is it, in a way, telecommunications, I feel, and JBG feels, is really the 4th utility behind water, gas, and power. And in the new world, as we think about what experts are terming as the fourth industrial revolution, we'll see a proliferation of artificial intelligence, sensor technology being in IoT, the emergence and the scaling of the hyperscalers and cloud technology, and then cybersecurity to sort of wrap around all of that. We think the next generation, and frankly the next sort of economic tailwind that we're likely to see, will be driven by these technologies, and all of those technologies are highly reliant on telecommunications. And and telecommunications is tough, and I'm no expert in it, and Dave can I'm sure can attest to this. It's not easy to set up this infrastructure in a way that's easy to consume. And so we've actually, CBRS is one component of our overall infrastructure stack, because we realize in order to deliver wireless amenities, you really need the wireline amenities too. And so we're looking at national landing.
Hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break. Let one of our great vendors have a word, and then we're going to come back and finish this conversation. All right, I didn't mean to cut you off, but now I know how those guys on those cable shows feel. They get a word, you got to go.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I just want to quickly, to the last point, I couldn't agree more with Vardon that, connectivity really is the next utility. I mean, it's not the next, it's just another utility at this point in time. And, if nothing else, the experience of the last 12 months of this pandemic have shown us how critical, connectivity is to, educate, to work, to live, essentially. You look at the new FCC chairwoman's initiatives around distance learning and making sure that, kids are connected, all kids are connected across the country. And I think it just underscores that, these ice storms down in Texas, loss of connectivity. It's incredible.
Well, and that's going to be a different, I'm sorry, finish your thought.
Last thing I want to say, because we were focusing a lot about the, and I didn't want to get into all the nitty gritty, or I would consume all of our time. But it is important for your listeners to understand if they haven't read up on CBRS, these new commercial opportunities that we're talking about for property managers, they're available at 2 tiers of access, right? So there's the priority access layer, which is the licenses that we were just talking about, JBG acquired in Arlington and Alexandria. And then there's another tier called general authorized access, which is more analogous again to unlicensed spectrum in that it's opportunistic use. There's not an interference protection like you get at the PAL tier. So JBG bought interference protection for the 40 megahertz and 30 megahertz of spectrum that Vardon was talking about. Pardon me. But for many, I would say for many applications, operating at the GA opportunistic tier will be perfectly suitable, perfectly adequate, and that is certainly an option for your listeners.
Right, and that, actually that was a question that I was getting ready to ask you was 30 seconds. How can CBRS Alliance, working with us, get this information out to the real estate industry? Because we rely on you as the true domain experts, and we want to be that bridge. How can maybe a little smaller company than JPG learn about and start to move into this world?
I'd first of all point you to our website, so ongoalliance.org. Ton of resources up there, everything from sort of CBRS 101 to how to deploy a private network to how do you get the cellular identifiers that you need to deploy a cellular private network. To reach out. We have info at ongoalliance.org, and we're happy to help.
And we're going to be working with you on webinars and when participating in our events to make sure that our audience, some of the leading real estate organizations in the world, get that top-notch information right from the organization who knows what they're talking about. Verdun, yeah, I can't help but wonder. I mean, you guys are definitely leaning in, and it's not just in a small way. That's a massive project, okay? And my question to you is, where did the vision initiate? Was it the telecommunications industry calling on you? Was it somebody inside your company? Was it you, that said, hey, a real estate project of this size and magnitude today needs to have a serious telecommunications strategy? Where did that come from?
Great question. So I credit where credit's due. It's certainly not just me. I actually, by way of introduction, I'm a relatively new member to the JBG team. I come to JBG by way of Accenture, and I've been focused on this topic of smart cities for the past 5 or 6 years. I had the good fortune of working with some really talented, strong vision leaders at JBG, from the C-suite on the way down to some of our leaders, Evan Regan-Levine and Adam Rashid, who have been the co-heads of this Smart City Initiative. And I think, Dave, you've met a few of my colleagues. They, in JBG early on, about 18 months, 2 years ago, started thinking about how on the backs of some of these really structural advantages that JBG has in national landing, given its holdings, given Amazon, given Virginia Tech, what's next? And what ended up being next is the Smart City Initiative. And when we think about smart cities, we don't think about it exclusively in terms of some of the whiz-bang gadgetry and use cases that we do think have value. We first thought about it from the ground up. And that's where really the telecommunications strategy from fiber through 5G, in-building DAS, and CBRS really come into life. And you see a stack here to kind of show you the different sort of discrete but interrelated components of our smart city infrastructure. What we're really excited about is building a smart city from the ground up and creating an innovation district. And we recognize that
bring back up.
The utility is having that utility being robust and world class is where it all starts.
Well, and I've been following smart cities for longer than I care to admit. And what's really interesting is the smart city initiatives that are getting the most traction are the private enterprise ones, not the public. Cities are too many moving parts, too many disagreements, to get consensus in an efficient, fast manner. When you do a private project like this, you basically can make decisions much faster, much more efficient. And it's exciting to actually see this come into fruition. So, Dave, we've only got a couple minutes left, 30, 60 seconds. What would you want to leave our audience with from your, a CBRS perspective, OnGo Alliance perspective? How do you wrap up the conversation?
Yeah, new tool in the toolkit, right? So, again, Wi-Fi DAS, great, well established. We know what they can and cannot do. If you got a need, around private internal communications, or you're looking for a better neutral host solution that, makes economic sense in buildings where DAS is not affordable, we have something to offer with CBRS. Price points are coming down all the time, especially on the LTE equipment and 5G as well. Very robust ecosystem of hardware available now. Lots of client devices and lots of form factors. It's not just smartphones. It's, IoT modules. It's security cameras, barcode scanners, a wealth of client devices now supporting the CBRS band. So, yeah, please, I think, we've heard.
We're gonna have both. We're gonna have both of you guys back on from different topics. Dave, obviously, the next logical big conversations are cybersecurity and then privacy. So we want to have those conversations. So we'd love to have you back on. And then Verdun, from the standpoint of the project, gosh, we could talk for hours about it. So what would your final thoughts for our audience today be?
Well, firstly, it's been a pleasure, speaking with both of you gentlemen about this topic. I think what I'd leave the viewers with is we're building this smart city. CBRS is a big component of it. We love to, we're actively looking for partners to help curate this infrastructure, curate this canvas of innovation, and partners to come in and paint the canvas and be part of that canvas. So please reach out. We'd love to work with a constellation of, like I said, partners, and also Jim and Dave, as we go along. It'd be great for others to learn from us and see what works in national landing and how it can be scaled and used elsewhere.
Well, gentlemen, unfortunately, we are at time. I knew this was going to happen. You talk about the tip of the iceberg. That was just the tip of the iceberg. But I want to thank both of you. This is the beginning of a conversation, and we're excited to be partnering with both of you and getting this information out to the industry. So thank you, and you have a wonderful day and a great weekend. Be well.
Thank you. You too. Thanks, Ron.
Everybody, take care.
All right. So with that, we will bring my partner Howard Berger on, who is going to do the weekly news in review. He's got some great stories for us. Howard, how are you today?
Thanks, Jim. I don't know if
You can't see it yet. There you go.
Oh, here I am.
So yeah, I took a little too much of your time again. I apologize, but I'm going to turn it over to you and give us the news.
Well, thanks, Jim. And this is a great show, by the way. Important, really important topic. I'm going to give you a little sampling of our featured news stories from our weekly news briefing. We release it every Thursday, 11 a.m. Pacific. Subscription's free. Just go up to our website, realcomm.com, and click on news. So first story on the smart building front. In this week's lead article, we feature part one of a two-part series by John Hester, a smart building consultant, on the state of the modern, very powerful, highly integrated and converged smart building platform, and how systems and facilities operations can now much more easily be integrated by an MSI, a master system integrator. And what that means is that a lot of the previous complexity and integrations can now be streamlined and handled by software and AI, both at the edge and in the cloud, which effectively reduce or greatly eliminate a lot of the unnecessary hardware that previously made these complex integrations very difficult and costly. Now, the beauty of cloud-based AI is that the software is now able to do a lot of the tedious, manual, time-intense legwork, including things like auto-tagging of assets with high accuracy, data lake creation, learning all of the system control sequences, plus data tasks such as integrating with external data connections like the weather and utility rates, etc. It's an exciting time for the adoption of smart building technologies. And now the master systems integrator, the MSI, has some new power tools, in his bag to do much more effectively do the work. Second, quick shout out to this week's technology partner, iOffice. Chad Smith, VP of Product Strategy for iOffice, discusses how occupiers can set themselves up for success by reevaluating some of the different strategies for creating more hybrid workplaces post-COVID reoccupancy. And in this briefing, there's some novel tips here for making your buildings a destination of choice, also developing a roadmap for PropTech investments. So thank you, iOffice, for that. Big news on the software front. MRI Software just announced that they've entered into an agreement to acquire the Manhattan real estate was were some of the pioneering IWMS, or integrated workplace management systems platforms for managing corporate real estate. Trimble has been a global leader in geospatial and logistics solutions. They acquired Manhattan back in 2014. It looks like the recent decision to divest was due to Trimble's wanting to refocus more on its connected construction capabilities. Now, the acquisition looks like a perfect fit for MRI and will now give them a mature stack of solutions for corporate occupiers to manage their real estate assets. So, last thing, and I can't close the news without parting comments on that slew of $250 million SPACs that are all over the place. They're out of control. Last week, we heard about Fifth Wall. We heard about the Tishman entries. This week, it's Silverstein, Matterport, RXR. They all jumped in with their own. They just keep coming. Who's next? So, Jim, Nance, Lisa, maybe we should start a Realcomm SPAC? No, maybe not. So I'm out of time.
Well, hold on. We could go on forever. That we're going to be having some conversations on these SPACs. A lot of money in the market, a lot of new ideas, a lot of companies that have been around for a while that we cannot forget. That conversation is not going away. And thank you for a great job of presenting this week's news.
My pleasure. See you all next week.
Take care. All right. So with that, before I wrap the show, we're going to hear from another one of our great sponsors, and I'm going to come back and tell you about next week's show. All right, that commercial drone deploy, thank you for that. And reminds me of Realcomm probably about 5 years ago when we flew a drone in the general session, and the frequencies conflicted with the robot we had on stage, and the drone fell from the sky, and everybody kind of laughed. And I said, you know, Realcomm is about taking chances and risks. You don't get anywhere without getting up to the plate, and you're going to strike out a few times. But obviously, the drone technology has come a long, long way. So with that, I just want to say thank you to our two guests, busy guys, taking their time to explain this whole new generation of in-building wireless technologies that is frankly going to shift the way we use these buildings. And it's really a great pleasure to have people of that caliber on the show, and also to our sponsors for making this possible. So, you know, COVID hopefully getting behind us. At least we can see a little bit of sunlight. Things are moving. People are not standing still. Next week's show, attainable, sustainable, tech-enabled housing. What does that mean? You know, housing has always been an issue. And now that we can apply technology to it, we can look at more efficient ways of producing it, of managing it. What does that all mean? We got two great guests, Dave Stanford from Real Foundations and Randy Norton from Multigreen. So with that, I bid you farewell for this week. Have a great weekend. Be well, thrive, and we will see you next week.